Okay, this is LaunchPad 2, activity number 6, a week of April 2nd, 2015. And today, activity 6 is basically yield management. So we'll be talking about yield management today, and this being activity 6. And we'll go through this real quickly here. One of the best ways to understand and critically assess operation performance is to perform a yield analysis of tea times and revenues. Even if no solutions to issues become immediately clear, this type of analysis for a particular window of tea times can provide a better understanding of the facility's play and revenue patterns. For this activity, everyone who's doing this will have to study their tea time management systems or tea sheet at your facility and perform an hour-by-hour analysis for a given set of days. This activity is similar to the saguaro sands example presented in Lesson 5 of your golf operations course manual. So part 1, obtain a set of tee sheets or a database from your facility for a recent month during the golf season. Study the pattern of play and identify days and time periods that immediately present themselves as particular active or inactive. Note tee times that are most consistently utilized and how usage changes from day to day or hour to hour within different days. Compare individual days of the week and evaluate if and how pricing structure affects usage at particular times, especially if pricing varies from hour to hour. Look for busy periods and white spaces and any other patterns that become evident. After completing your initial analysis, answer the following questions. So here's the questions we're going to look at. Describe the playing patterns that are evident from your analysis of the tee sheet. Identify the busy days of the week and busy times during those days. Also identify the tee times when few rounds are being played. So our apprentice here doing his work, here's what he said. Play at my facility, it's a private equity-owned member club, is very predictable, especially given that we're a 12-month operating season. Starting at the beginning of the week, the first tee opens at 7 a.m. on Tuesdays. From 7 to 8, there is a typical crowd of the same players each week. We prefer to tee off ahead of our ladies group on Tuesday, which is the ladies group is from 8 to 9 every Tuesday. This hour is usually mostly filled with 1 or 2 tee times not utilized during that time, so it's a busy hour. After 9 a.m., so from 8 to 9, the ladies fill the tee sheet. After 9, there are a handful of the tee times utilized till about noon, which is usually highly utilized during those hours, so they're busy from 9 to noon. After 1, the tee sheet is not utilized more than about 33%. Wednesday typically show a spike in activity in the 8 to 9 a.m. hour, with most of the tee times being utilized. There's mostly full utilization until about 10, when the number of players looking to tee off dramatically reduces until the noon hour. After about 1 p.m., tee time utilization is spotty and not very predictable, typically leaving most of the available tee times not utilized. This pattern repeats until Saturday. On Saturdays, tee times are mostly fully utilized until about 10 a.m., at which point the pattern described during the weekday afternoon play repeats itself for Saturdays. Sundays are typically a carbon copy of Saturdays. So at this private club, it's pretty much the same group of people play the same every week, so it's fairly predictable. In the afternoons, it becomes people showing up here and there, and that's kind of typical of a lot of private clubs. There's certain hours of the week that are 100% utilization. Again, typically Saturday mornings, Sunday mornings tend to be busy. Wednesday mornings, Friday afternoons, I know the club here, Friday afternoons are extremely busy time. And at a private equity club, the selling of the tee times is not the primary concern. It's more about the members having access to the golf course when they want it. So spacing out times and making the tee times available, using back nine as options to players so they can play when they come. I know the club I'm at here, it's Saticoy Country Club. We do not take tee times, so when you get here, you kind of get your name on a list and go out to the tee when it's available. Generally, it's come right here, go straight out, hit a few balls, and go out. And that's one of the benefits of a private club. Obviously, there's really not a long line of waiting. Again, a very busy private club that might be different. You may need tee times. We do not offer tee times here. It's just as you kind of first come, first serve, you go to the tee. And it works for a club with a fairly small membership. A club with a large membership, tee times to become at a premium sometimes, and that's when looking at your utilization times becomes really important, knowing what days are busy, what days are not. Can you do split tee start? Do you need to do split tee starts? Many of a club will go to a split tee if a lot of your play is concentrated in a say 2 hours on a Saturday morning from 7 to 9. Everybody wants to play, and you can't handle them all off of one tee. You could always do a split tee again. Usually from 10 to noon is a a quieter time. So the people who start off at 7 on the front are going to come 9:15 or so off the back. They come around and you can work a split tee start to help the utilization of your golf course. So these are things that many different kinds of things you can do to modified shotguns to maximize your tee times and tee sheet at a private club. Public golf course, you're looking at times, and we're going to get into the yield management on a public golf course in a second. So we'll finish this up here, this question, then we're going to get into the hour-by-hour analysis. Next, identify several potential reasons why the course is either busy or slow during those periods above. This person answered, when it comes to tee time utilization, a facility like mine, the private equity club, pricing does not affect peak time. Instead, the main factor for surges in tee time utilization is simply when players feel like playing. During the times described above, the players are recurring members who play in their own games at specific times pretty reliably on a weekly basis. So in other words, at a private club like this, it's a very predictable flow of players. And that's typical of a lot of private clubs. The same groups play at Wednesdays at 10 o'clock, Fridays at 2 o'clock, etc., etc. So those are kind of things that happen on a basis. It's a little easier to predict your times at a private club versus a public golf course where you're at the kind of the whim of the public that are playing your golf course. So with that being said, we're going to go here. So we're going to talk about what we have next. We're going to pick a day within a month, for an example, and perform an hour-by-hour analysis of the rounds. You can use a regular spreadsheet or software that's linked to your point of sale TSA. You may also estimate how much revenue these rounds generate. We're going to open up a spreadsheet, and we're going to, which I've already put aside here for us to work on today, and it's kind of basically we're going to use this as an example today of an hourly utilization analysis chart. Typical, this analysis was done as a fairly real-life analysis of a pretty high-end public golf course, and this is kind of their utilization, if you will. And this is a pretty generalization of a Saturday morning. I got to pick a one day, but you can do this every day of the week at your facility. If you're at a public golf course that is relying on green fees, this is one of the most valuable tools you can have in your operation, and being as accurate as you can will make a huge difference in how you plan your weeks, your months, and how you can maximize revenues and utilization. So what this chart says, and we're going to kind of break it down so we can understand it here a little bit. This course typically charges the $100 green fee, and that's where this highlight that one in yellow right there for us. This here is a $100 green fee. Is their typical weekend morning green fee, say $100. So what they do here is, if you looked at the utilization and this here is based on how many days in advance you can make a reservation. This course took reservations basically a week in advance. Okay, and that's what this spreadsheet is assuming. You can see under the day 7 over here on this one right here, you can see where we've got some numbers filled in. So what would generally happen at this golf course, you can see here, from the 6 to 7 o'clock hour, there weren't a lot of advance reservations. People kind of showed up on that morning, so they had probably 20 players show up in that early 6 o'clock to 7 o'clock hour. And so if you look down the bottom, they had 20 rounds played. There was 28 rounds available. That's assuming they had 7 tee times per hour. 4 persons in a group equals rounds available, and their inventory is 28 rounds per hour is the rounds available. And that's where we kind of, actually, that's your starting point for more than anything. How many rounds are you going to play an hour? If you went 10-minute tee times, you'd only have 6 an hour. That'd be 24 players an hour. Again, depending on the tee time spread, how many rounds are available per hour. This line simply, as we go through this line, I'll highlight it really quick. As we look through this here, we're assuming here we're going to play 28 players every single hour of the day, all the way to 5 o'clock at night. Again, this would be, I would have to say, this is probably a midsummer or summer type thing. Again, it's in Southern California, it's year-round, but as we know, in the wintertime it gets darker earlier, so in the wintertime your total rounds available would come down some. You'd take away these last 3 hours probably. You wouldn't be able to have many starts after 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock for sure. In the wintertime, you'd probably stop this at, say, 1 o'clock. So your February times, you'd take off these last 4 28s, and you'd have whoops. So you'd end up with 100 rounds less in those, a little over 100 rounds less in the wintertime than you would in the summertime hours. And maybe in June and July, you'd actually add a 5 to 6. You could possibly add some players into that hour down the bottom, have some more utilization down at that end of it. So knowing your number of rounds available is kind of the first place you have to start. How many rounds are available, what time of year, and that's where you would start your formula. Again, I'm assuming this is just a basic, probably late spring, early summer day. We're going to take tee time. We're going to have players teeing off till 5 p.m., so it's the summertime hours. Next line down here is your rounds available inventory, which we just did. Next is your rounds filled, how many people played during those hours. And this is a kind of, I guess I'd say, a pretty typical, probably Southern California public golf course. In the first hour, they had 20 players play from 6 to 7 a.m. On 7 to 8, 8 to 9, 9 to 10, they are full utilization. Every tee time was filled for those 3 hours. And if we look here when those times were booked, those times were booked a week in advance. And again, probably most courses in Southern California are booking out those prime time. Again, this was when golf was booming. The prime times were filled up a week in advance. So as you see over here, the 7 days. Now this could look different. This could play around with this a little bit. We're going to say they had 20 on the 7 days out. 5 days out, they had 4 more, and then 3 days out, someone else filled it. And you can kind of track when the tee times were filled, how they were filled, and that would kind of give you an idea. And that would be the same all the way across the board. This one, say we only had 16 filled in this hour. On 7 days out, we had 4 here. 4 days out, we had 4 people there. And then say 2 days out, we had a spot open. Someone filled it 2 days prior. So now you still have your utilization. So that's what you're going to look at. Is you're going to have to chart when these people's reservations were made, so you can really get an accurate count of when are people making their reservations. And again, and this one assumes here, like on a 6 to 7 o'clock hour, really nobody called in advance. They called the day before, maybe even the day of. This might even be say 12 here, and then 8 people just showed up between 6 and 7. That's a walk-on, basically. And you'd have some of those pretty much in every hour, probably. So the more accurate you could track when your people made the times, the more valuable this sheet becomes to you and to your operation as to how to plan for these things. Because, if you came in here and you had no reservation, say, in the 10 o'clock hour, you can respond to that. So I'll get to that in a moment, though. So we're going to just go through the sheet, then we'll talk a little about the strategy behind it. So down here, this simply comes down to saying how many rounds are filled. They only had 20 rounds for the first hour, so there are 8 rounds unutilized. There are 8 spots unutilized. So they only had a 71% occupation or occupancy rate, if you will, in that first hour. And then we went to at 7 to 8, 8 to 9, and 9 to 10. We had 100. We had 28 players each hour. We completely filled the tee sheet, 100% utilization. That's perfect. Now at 10 to 11 o'clock, it waned a little bit. They only had 22. They had a couple of open tee times, so they went down to 79% occupancy. 11 to 12, whoops, we dropped down. Only 16 players played, and we went down to 57%. From 12 to 1 was even worse. Only 8 people played. They went down to 29%. At 1 o'clock, when this club started its twilight rate, all of a sudden for the lower rate, we see that they went up to 28 again and 28 again. So the lower rate at 1 to 3 surely seemed to get it back to full occupancy. Then as the day wore on, you can kind of expect it's very hard to fill these late tee times if you're not going to get in 18 holes, etc. So price may become an option. We go down the bottom here. This is their dollar per round. They do $100 during the day. And here you see at 1 o'clock they drop it to 60, where we went from 29% utilization to 100% utilization. So obviously price was a factor towards the later part of the morning. When you look at total revenue per hour, the first hour they did $2,000. Then they fully occupied the golf course for $2,800 for 3 straight hours. $2,200, then to $1,600, down to $8. And you can see where they started to drop a little bit in these hours here. They're doing down to $800 from 12 to 1, but they only had 29%. So they left basically $2,200 on the table during that hour for utilization. Then over here they pick back up and they go to twilight rate and they get their occupancy way up again, a lower price. But as you can see, this 1680 sure beats the 800. So if you can get a couple hours of full 100% occupancy at $60, it's surely better than 29% at $100. So here comes this is where this thing gets really valuable to an operation of how do we get the maximum dollars for your rounds, and that's what this whole tee time utilization is really all about. How do we get the maximum dollars out of this operation? Now, if I were just sitting back here like I am and looking at this from above, you would say, you know what we need to do? We need to do something for these 11 to 1 o'clock hour. We can see our utilization rate goes way down from 11 to 1. People obviously are waiting for a twilight here at 6. We're filling it up at 1 o'clock to 2 o'clock for a twilight rate. What should we do? At that point, this is where management would come and start looking at this. And as you as an operator, when you get your club or you're at a club, you look at this and say, you know what, we're leaving an awful lot of money on the table for those 2 hours. Can we come up with possibly maybe an intermediate rate, or a rate if you book more than, book more than 8 days out? We give you a, say we put a, just for fun here, if we put this 11 o'clock rate to $80. Right now we're going to make $1,600 in total revenue. If we made this $80 a round, but move this up to rounds filled to 22, all of a sudden we're up to $1,760. We made more money. Again, if we made this here $80 again, and move this surely poor occupancy of 8 and move that up to even 20, all of a sudden we had another $1,000 to our pot. So we really just literally gained. To take this back 2 steps here. We gained a couple $100 very quickly there by just changing the rate and getting more players. But it's great. The player counts are great, and that's obviously driving your tee sheet, maximizing your dollars on your fees, and your green fees are really important. But there's also the other side. More bodies equal more revenue, total operation. People who are there are going to eat, are going to drink, are going to buy golf balls, are going to use the driving range, are going to add activity to the club, and all those. This tee time utilization is strictly based on a green fee. But what's your, the other side of this equation we look at is what is your dollar per round of revenue? If you look over the whole operation, how much, if the person is paying $100 green fee for this person who plays at 8 o'clock in the morning over here for $100, is he going to then have lunch after he's done? Say even 50% of the people, you had 28 people. If half of them have lunch for $10 or $14 and a beer, say $20 average for that person in the food and beverage operation, if half of them stay, say 14 people times there's another $1,400. I'm sorry, wrong calculation. $20 a person, so that's $280 more into the bottom line for you, or to your revenues, your gross revenues at that point. So anything you can do to get people or players to utilize the facility equals dollars, driving range, etc. It's all part of the operation. If you're at a public golf course, especially, again, privates are a little bit different. Your green fees, it's not your driving factor or green fees at all. Your driving factor, of course, is memberships, and golf shop sales, etc. But memberships are your big thing. So at a club like ours here, member satisfaction is the key. Therefore, the fact that we don't take tee times is one of our selling features. We don't take tee times. You can come here pretty much any time and play golf, and that's a selling feature for our golf course. You don't have to worry about when you play. At a golf course where you're relying pretty much solely on your green fees, or your green fees, and your revenues per public, it's really important that you can get as many people and many players on the golf course as you can. Again, with the class before this, we talked about pace of play. And that comes into this too. At this course, at 28 players per round is a fairly comfortable. You're almost 9 minutes of tee time, which is fairly comfortable. If you put that at 7 minutes, you'd get basically 8 tee times. You'd get an extra 4 players per hour. And if you took that across the board, if you have a golf course, say you have a fairly easy golf course, here we have 312 possible rounds. If we went to 32, we go in 352 possible rounds if you went up to an extra time. Now, the problem with that is maybe you can get, again, depends on the type of golf course. If it's a fairly easy golf course that moves around fairly quickly, maybe you can push that and add an extra time here or there. Again, maximizing your rounds per day, your rounds per hour. But that's a slippery slope. If you put too many people on the golf course, it's going to impact play. It's just like a freeway and you put too many cars on it, it's a traffic jam. If you put too many players on a golf course, and if you have a difficult golf course, or especially an opening hole, it's nice to have basically a runway down your first fairway. It'd be perfect. A wide open, kind of very little trouble, fairly flat green, fairly easy first hole makes it fun to get people out. However, if you follow that up with a difficult par 3 or a difficult second hole, all you're going to do is back up people on the second tee. So tee time management and this utilization chart, it does also link back to if you want to try to get this 300 people off every Saturday, you better be able to get them around that golf course in a reasonable amount of time. So they play off each other. The pace of play will directly influence your utilization. If you want to utilize it a couple Saturdays and put those 32 players an hour out, and then they don't get around until 6 hours. That, if I tell you what, a couple weeks later, you're going to see that 32 players per hour drop to 20 players an hour because people won't come back. It takes too long to play golf. So there surely is a balancing act to all this. Knowing where you are, that's what this class is today, of knowing how to do this and doing it is really important part of the process to understand when your tee sheet is full, when it's not full. And this is just one day, this is a snippet, a snapshot in time of one day on one golf course. But if you were to do this week after week for several months and chart every day and do this, it doesn't take very long to do. You just plug in some numbers and it'll spit it out. It would really tell you a lot about how the operation can run. And, this can look all different ways, obviously. What would happen, say, if you weren't getting a whole lot of utilization in those first morning hours at $100 and everybody was waiting for the $60 or the $80 rate later in the day? What would that tell you? That could tell you the same thing. If you had very poor utilization all morning long and it filled up all afternoon at $60, the public's telling you prices are too high. I can't fill it up, and everybody's waiting for the discount. And vice versa. If you're oversubscribed every single Saturday morning and people are calling and getting turned away for tee times left and right, maybe your prices are too cheap. And maybe you have to raise your price $10 or $5 or whatever the number is in your area. But that also help you adjust your pricing accordingly. If you're 100% sold out every single day you're there, and you have people clamoring to play, again, maybe it's time to look at the rates the other way and adjust accordingly. So this can help you also. This one little sheet is really kind of like almost the foundation of what your strategy is based on. Do you want to be a 32 player an hour, high volume, run the people through as fast as you can operation, or do you want to give it more of a 10-minute tee time and make it more of a, charge a little bit more and make the people have a different experience? And, that decision may or may not be yours, but if you have the understanding of what and why, you can then present this or understand it and maybe contribute to, take it to the manager and say, look, we're only doing 29% of our rounds from 12 to 1 o'clock every single Saturday. Maybe we could do something to beef that up and maybe put in a special, or if you book so many days in advance to fill these hours in here, how do we get these 2 hours more full? And you can bring money into those hours. That would be a big benefit to the club. So how you use this is really important. If you formalize it like this, it's excellent. If you have a non-formal, you look, and it's pretty basic. If you're an operation pro, you kind of know when people are going to play. It's not a mystery. You know every Saturday morning at 8 o'clock it's going to be packed. Saturday morning at 9 o'clock is going to be packed. Well, you know that by being there. So do you have to do a utilization report? I recommend you do to see when it stops and when it slows down. When is it change? How far in advance are people making tee times? Are you the last one they call, Friday night for Saturday morning? Or are they excited about your course and they're on the phone as soon as the tee time system opens up? Are they filling your tee sheet? Like I said, this particular golf course looks like they're doing pretty well, pretty far out. People are booking a week in advance. That says it's pretty popular. So those are the kind of things that help you a lot. When are people booking? Are they filling your tee sheets well in advance? Or like I said, are you the last one they call Friday night to try and sneak on Saturday morning? So that's something to look at too, when they book and how your bookings are coming in. That can tell you a lot of where you are in your local area in the pecking order. Are you the first one they call, or are you the last one they call? And knowing where you stand, again, that can dictate your strategy going forward. So like I said, this is one of the foundations of what you do when you're working in operation. This will kind of tell you what you are, who you are, and also help you be what you want to be. And I think I don't think there's an exception to this rule. Everyone wants to make more money. Every operation will do better with more revenue coming in, and the more you can do to increase that revenue for your facility, if it's adding a special rate somewhere during the day to get those utilization numbers up, that will really help your operation, and that's really what it's all about. And for an apprentice going through these drills or exercises, again, it may not affect you today in your operation, what you're doing. It may not affect you at all, but understanding this and knowing this and having this in your back pocket, it's really important going forward. At some point in your career, you probably will have to or will want to have something like this and the knowledge of how to do this and what to do with it, and to figure out where I need to be, make decisions based on facts and numbers and hard numbers. When you're making a decision, is it time to raise our rates? Well, obviously this court doesn't want to raise its rate around the noon hour, that's for sure, because they're not getting any kind of utilization. But I said if you're over 100% capacity, yeah, you can look at raising rates. If you're down in the 40s and 50% capacity, it's time to look the other direction. Do I need to cut prices? Do I need to add specials? Do I need to do some kind of, there's all kinds of specials you can get on the other side, couponing, friends of, where you get, play so many rounds, you get something off, or you get something when you show up. There's all kinds of different discounting without discounting ways of filling a T-sheet. And that's not really what we're about today. Today is really about understanding how to use this utilization chart analysis. To use this again as understanding what it does, how it works, and what you need to do. So to go over to review it really quickly, how this sheet is laid out, we'll go over quickly here. Days in advance, it's on the left-hand column. This whole column right here is all days in advance. How many days in advance you're going to book your time, and that's where you put in the numbers. How many people booked in this here is 6 o'clock, obviously the hours of the day. How many people booked in those hours? Down here we have your rounds available. How many rounds are available per day, per hour. And then we use how many rounds you actually filled. You look at this later and you say, how many rounds do we actually fill during those hours? Do we get it fully or not? And then this is just a basic subtraction of top to bottom. How many did you unfill? How many were not utilized? Gives you a number of players that you missed for the day. And the bottom is a percentage of how many played versus how many were available. Gives you a total percentage. This line down here is just your average, your green fee for those hours. This here is simply the number of players times your green fee. Here we had, in this case, we had 20 players times $100 greens fee, simply $2,000. This just multiplies across. And this is the price that you charge during those hours. So during those hours, this is what you were charging. That's what kind of gives you those numbers. And this one, this particular instance, was revenue per round included golf carts, and this one says on merchandise sales. You can add merchandise sales in. You don't. It's again depending on how you want to do it. You can do it either way. This one did not take merchandise sales into account, and that's fine. So again, if you want to do that, you can do that also, and that's probably a good way, because you can do merchandise and food and beverage sales. So then you know what is your average revenue per round to put in their revenue per round, and then you can actually get a really good number at the bottom line, what I did for the day and how I can do that. So all these things tie together. Your number of players obviously impacts your food and beverage operation and your merchandise sales and your driving range. All these things kind of tie together. So the important part of today's class was understanding what this hourly utilization analysis chart is, how you use it. It is available when you click on your, when you go to in your LaunchPad, click here. Like I said, when you're in your part 2 of your hour-by-hour analysis, it's just going to, just get in here real quick. This here, we'll click here, this file here, we get you this, it brings you to this sheet. And it's just basically what we just are working on. It's just a blank sheet. As you can see, this is the sheet we just did. It's just blank. So the one I was doing earlier, I took that same sheet as you saw and just filled in some numbers so we could play today a little bit with it and kind of show you what it looks like when there's numbers in it versus this blank, scary looking blank Excel spreadsheet that doesn't make any sense when you just look at it like that. So this one here is actually the sheet kind of with the numbers filled in, how it relates to each other, and how the numbers will fall in and fall out. So that's what this whole sheet does here. There aren't any formulas in there. You have to formula yourself. I can surely help you if you're looking for formulas. I can let you go, give you the formulas as we go along. And my sheet, I can always email you this sheet here if you're interested. You just give me shoot me an email. I'd be happy to shoot you this email out with the numbers filled in. You can fill in your own numbers if you'd like to do that. But this has all the math done in it for you, so it's pretty simple. With that being said, that'll conclude our class for today. We did this in 30 minutes, a record time for yield management. Next week, April 9th, we're going to go into merchandising and inventory management. Then we're going to do activity 1 and activity 2. Activity 1, we're going to define the purpose of the merchandise operation. And number 2, activity 2 is analyze historical performance data and information on current trends. So we start next week, we start into a 4-week excursion, if you will, into merchandising. And there's some a lot of spreadsheet analysis is going to go on the next couple of weeks. So stay tuned for that, and we'll take care of that going forward. Take care, everyone. Hope to see you all next week.